Realized I was falling in love with my sister-in-law, who is still grieving her late husband, and now even her son wishes she was his mother. I've been in love with this woman for a very long time, maybe a couple of years at this point, and I'm not sure if I should just kill it or attempt to make something with her. I met my ex-wife, her sister, when I was 23 years old, and the relationship developed very quickly, and by 26 I had my son and daughter and had gotten married. However, within months of being married, my ex-wife had an affair, but worse than that, the man she cheated with had gotten her into heroin. After confronting her on this, she said she was going to get help, but instead she left in the night. I haven't heard from her in 4 years, and last I've heard she's still with that guy and are homeless in Las Vegas. Not sure how true that is, but being focused on holding it together for the kids, I really don't have the time to chase her down, nor do I want to after what she pulled. I ended up getting a divorce in absentia. I did, however, maintain a very positive relationship with my in-laws after the fact. Every other weekend my kids stay over with their grandparents on that side, and they pretty much treat me like a son still. I still go to parties at Christmas and I'm reasonably liked by the family. Nobody talks about my ex anymore, mainly to not worry my kids. My oldest, my son, is very hurt by his mother leaving. He's 9 now, and I've had to get therapy for him after he told me he hoped his mother was dead. She had been getting verbally abusive toward the end, which was when he was around 5 or 6 anyhow. In the year following my ex leaving, her sister and her boyfriend had started coming around a lot to see the kids. They knew I worked a lot and would babysit and call it practice, as they wanted to have children of their own. My kids loved them and were spoiled by them, which I didn't mind because we all needed a little positivity. They got married and were very in love. However, her husband was killed in a workplace accident shortly after the birth of their daughter. It has been extremely rough and painful for everyone involved, as one can imagine. I followed my Sil's example and began to take her daughter to give her time to herself if things got too hard to deal with or she needed alone time. She's been in grief counseling for a few years, but she still wears her ring and has told me she can't ever imagine dating again. I talk to her about him frequently and she's gotten to a better place, but she's still very much in love with him. I can't imagine that sort of pain. Over the last 2 years we've been a more constant figure in each other's lives. My kids love their aunt and I have her over for dinner a couple times a week. My daughter and her daughter have become close and love being around each other, so they have sleepovers. I've moved on from my ex by this, but the idea of dating possibly someone dangerous as their mother has kept me out of the dating scene. I don't know when it happened, but slowly I began to get soft on my Sil. She's a great mom for what she's had happen to her. She's one of the sweetest people I know, and her sense of humor always leaves me laughing and happy. Then I started realizing that I'm physically attracted to her. I've always felt kind guilty about it because her late husband was a good friend, and since she's obviously is still grieving, so I've kept it to myself. Since COVID started we've been together a bit more because social distancing has had us lose contact with most other people. Nothing romantic has ever been discussed and I try not to flirt, but last week it was very late and after the kids went to bed I made us a few drinks, not enough to get drunk, but she decided she'd rather spend the night, so I took my couch. I woke up to breakfast this morning and the 4 of us felt like the sort of family I've always wanted. She even kissed my forehead, which is not something she normally does. I still didn't say anything, but after she left I found my son quietly playing with his toys in his room. He looked upset, so I asked him if he was alright. He tells me point blank in the way only a kid can that he wishes Sil was his mother. I sat down with him and asked him why he thought that way, and he gave a whole bunch of reasons for being nice to him, that she never yells about anything. He likes seeing her at his grandparents and she draws pictures with him, which I didn't know they did. By the end of it my heart that is already melting for this woman even more wound up. When visiting, dropping them off with their grandparents, I tried to breach the subject with her folks to kind of feel around how people would see. I made a joke about she and I acting like a married couple sometimes, and they didn't laugh and were kind of standoffish, friendly, but either they know something or they disapprove. It's getting too hard for me to ignore or pretend it's not getting to me. I'm in love with her. Either I've got to kill it and find some way not to think of her, or I have to find some sort of way to navigate through this situation and tell her everything. Update 1. Anyway, does anyone know a subreddit I could post this to that wouldn't get locked? I feel guilty that people took the time to leave me messages and that I can't reply or speak with them. I checked this and was like, holy hell. I've got to get dinner and get the kids to bed, but if somebody could suggest a place to post updates in the future where things aren't so strict, I would appreciate it. Firstly, I'd like to thank everyone who gave me advice on how to proceed and ideas and things I could maybe say to my former Sil. What I ended up doing. Shortly after making the first post, I remembered that my children were spent Sunday night over their grandparents' house, and typically when they do this, my niece, Sil's daughter, will join them. I allow these bi-weekly visits because I think it's important for them to maintain a healthy relationship with their mother's parents. And Sil lets her daughter go because she enjoys playing with my daughter. Well, I realized we'd both have a free night. Normally I'd just game or hit the gym an extra night, but I figured it would be the perfect opportunity to Sil without the kids being around. So I sent her a text saying, hey, kids are out this Sunday, was thinking you might want to get dinner. It was a fairly upscale place that reopened 2 months or so ago for outdoor dining. I never ask her out to dinner and we're almost never alone together, or without a child in the other room. She says she'd love to, and so my panic starts setting in because now I've got to actually act on my feelings. I ask her if she'd prefer meeting at my place and taking one car or meeting at the restaurant. She says she'll come by my place first. I'm a bit more cleaned up than normal, dressed up but not overly dressed. She shows up and my god, she's in a very nice evening dress, makeup, not something she normally wears, really looking stunning. I must have been slack-jawed for a second. I had to be lol. We make a little small talk, compliment how we look, but I still don't have my nerve yet and she isn't pushing the issue. Dinner is really wonderful, they had live jazz type group playing. Definitely coming back to this place. She tells me this is the first time she's really had an adult social outing that didn't involve her daughter in a few years, and I mention that it's about as long for me. We're laughing, joking, talking, a little casual touching here and there. I can't seem to find my nerve though. I'm afraid of ruining this moment, so I just submit to having fun. But as we're leaving, my mind snaps and I'm just like, fuck it. And when we stand to go back to the car, I give her my arm and we walk back to the car arm in arm, no awkwardness, nobody mentioning that it's happening. I open her door for her and I plan on driving her back to her car. As I open the door she BS me. Looking sort of nervous, she just outright tells me to stop and that she wanna kiss me. There was no alcohol at dinner, so this is all her. So I pull her in and we kiss. I can barely describe how wonderful it felt to finally touch her. Well, the kissing goes on outside this restaurant with her leaned against my car for at least a half an hour. When we finally break, we share a few more dreamy looks before we get in the car and drive back to my place. She's holding my hand as I'm driving. I don't think I've ever been happier. I confess to her that I've started having feelings for her a long time ago, but what with the terrible things we went through, I didn't want to scare her away. She tells me that she's carried a torch for about 6 months herself. At that time I had gone on a couple Tinder dates, and since we were just friends I described what a mess of a time those dates were. She tells me she began feeling intensely jealous and angry that I was seeing these girls. It was about that time it clicked in her mind that she had somehow developed feelings for me. As it turns out, I didn't approach her because of her late husband, and she wasn't approaching me because she was afraid I'd see too much of her sister, my ex-wife, in her and start to resent her for it. I invited her in after we got back home and we decided to try and fight off the desire to jump straight into bed, and just sat on couch snuggling and talking about what we would need to do to make this a working relationship. There were some really teary moments there. We of course talked about her late husband a little and where she feels in the grief process, saying I don't want to rush her and that I'm not going anywhere. If she needs time, I'll wait as long as she needs me to. She says that she feels like she's in a place where she could love again, that she's long past feeling guilty for having feelings for me. It was something she struggled with. She then brought up her sister, and the obvious questions few people asked in the comments. What would we do if X ever decided to show her face around here again or try to get back into my kid's life? What if she comes back reformed and apologetic? Would I take her back? I told Sil that's a hard no, that I've forgiven her for cheating on me, but I will never forgive her for what she did to my son. He was quite a sunshiny and happy boy before his mother started cheating, using, and lashing out at him. He's doing better now, but for a long while his behavior and negativity for somebody so young troubled me. Sil was concerned how he might react to her, as unlike our respective daughters he is old enough to understand everything. I told her not to tell him as it might embarrass him, but not too long ago he told me he wished his aunt was his mom instead. We said we were going to take it slow and now go to fast with things, but the kissing started again, and since we were in private this time, we gave up the fight to stay out of the bedroom. I have had fantasies throughout the duration of my feelings for her, and getting to pet her face in the morning was one I finally got to live out. Moving forward, we are going to establish date nights and work on building on our already strong foundation. When we inevitably tell our folks we're a couple, we're going to do it together. But that's where I'm at. That's it, that's my update. If this subreddit allows, maybe I'll do another to say how the parents, in-laws, and kids take the news. 2 years of wishing she was mine and now she is. Better not F this up. Oop. Next weekend we are having dinner as a family with my in-laws, and if it feels like the time is right, we're going to take Mill and Phil aside and tell them what's going on and that we're going to be seeing each other romantically. Oop, they love me and my kids. I know they aren't happy about the state of their eldest daughter, but they know I tried. They saw me try and they've seen me struggle to keep it together after she left us. If I sit them down and tell them that I'm in love with their youngest, I'm sure they won't be too upset if they are even upset. We spend a lot of time together anyhow, and her mother already thinks we're seeing each other secretly lol. Update 2. Edit: I forgot to add that I am referring to my ex-wife as Jessica and my sister-in-law, who I had been calling Sil, to Sylvia because funny. Well, we've told everyone, and for the most part it's gone over fairly well. When our respective kids were with my in-laws, Sylvia and I went to go see my parents. They've met her a handful of times, but they don't really know her too well, as my in-laws and my family rarely attended mutual functions. They at least recognized who she was. My dad isn't a particularly sentimental person, so I have no idea what he thinks about it, but my mother is on board. She did ask, does Jess know? And we told her that I haven't even spoken with her in 4 years and Sylvia hasn't heard from her in 2, that we'd cross that bridge when we got to it. Other than that, my folks just seemed happy for me. Yesterday we attended a small family gathering for Labor Day at my in-laws. We knew the reception here would be a little more chilly as they're all also related to my ex-wife. My parents did us the favor of taking the kids to the zoo for the afternoon and ice cream too. We arrived at the party together and of course everybody is wondering where the kids are. Felt like a million things were telling me not to do this, but I took her by the hand and we both explained the kids were not here because we intended on telling everyone that we are now a couple. This wasn't a huge crowd, maybe like 8 people, but it really felt like I announced it to a stadium. I don't know how we expected it to go, but several of her aunts were very pleased with this. We got some hugs. At first nobody even mentioned my ex-wife. They were just happy because they had all settled on Sylvia just never dating again. It was only Mill that caused any issues. She told the party that she knew we were an item because I was always giving her puppy dog eyes and told them Sylvia talked about me nonstop. She asked for how long we had been dating in secret and I told her only a week. She scoffed and told me that she didn't think starting a relationship off by lying would be a smart move. She then accused, albeit in a joking manner to the guests, that Sylvia and I had vanished at a pool party in June to smooch. Her mother and father asked to talk with us after the party and asked us just how serious things were, and like my parents asked whether my ex-wife knew or not. When I said no and that her opinion shouldn't matter given she abandoned her family 4 years ago, they said they would be more comfortable with everything if I was to tell Jessica that I am now dating her sister. They are both intensely afraid that my ex will return sober and renewed, make an attempt to make amends, discover that I am now in love with her younger sister and relapse. It sounded to me as if they knew something I didn't, and as it turns out Jess has been calling and talking to them for a year now and they just haven't told me. I was upset they kept this from me. Sylvia was very upset too, because not once after her husband's death has Jess ever tried to call her. They show me her Facebook profile, the one she blocked me from, and there she is looking pretty normal, not like a burned out husk. I have to admit that seeing her not looking like the junkie she became when she left made me feel a little better, and Sylvia too. Her parents kept their contact with her a secret because she is ashamed of what she's done and feels that she's deserved to lose her kids and couldn't face them after all that happened. Sylvia's parents gave me her phone number and asked that I please call her and speak with her. I told her that my feelings for Sylvia are real and there is no chance I reconcile with Jess. Phil seemed to nod in approval, but Mill honestly looks like she was hoping we'd fix things. After we left I talked to Sylvia about it, and though we discussed it before, a circumstance where Jess returns, we decided to revisit the conversation in light of these new revelations. I told Syl that I am in love with her, my whole heart is hers, and that my feelings of love for her are something deeper and stronger than anything I ever felt for my ex-wife. She ends up crying from the stress of the situation, anger with her parents for keeping secrets, and anger with her sister for not calling her or offering condolences at all after her husband's death. She then admits that she is afraid I might leave her if her sister returns, and I assure her this will never happen. It took some long hugs and a lot of kisses to smooth over the situation, but by the time we went to pick up the kids, we were holding hands together again and feeling more connected than ever. She's been spending the night at my place pretty frequently since we've been together. So the kids don't see anything. I've been setting my alarm for 5 in the morning, getting up and moving to the couch. Well, the morning after we decided to tell the little ones what is going on. Our daughters seemed very happy, but they are too young to really grasp what's actually taking place. All they know is they can play together more. I did take my son aside, just me and him, and asked him if he was okay with this and what he thought about it. He asked if we'd all be living together. I told him maybe someday. He asked if this made his aunt his stepmom now, and I said he's free to call her what he's comfortable with and I will respect it, and she would too because we both love him. He then asked me a lot of questions about his own mother, things he had never asked me before, and I answered pretty much everything he wanted to know. I toned some of my answers down a bit. He's learned a little about the dangers of drugs from school programs, and I was finally honest to that degree when I told him his mom had a problem and she made some bad choices. He asked me why his mother didn't love him, and that broke my heart. I assured him the best I could that his mother did love him, she had just made a lot of terrible mistakes and that sometimes adults just don't do the right thing when they should. He asked me if I still loved her. I told him that I hoped she would get better and that I don't want her to be sick anymore, but that she hurt me and him so badly that I couldn't love her like I did before. I'm not sure he got all of that, but I tried explaining it to him the best I could. All that aside, he has been so much happier and less withdrawn since Sylvia has been with us, and he's always going out of his way to do all the typical kid stuff to impress her that I did with my own mom. At the end of the day I still have that phone call with the ex to dread. But, having Sylvia with me, being able to kiss her and hold her at night, it really puts some joy back into me that's been gone for a very long time. I don't think I even knew how unhappy I'd been all these years until I realized how happy she made me feel. We've been doing all the happy young lover stuff. She's been leaving me love letters in my work lunchbox, even little poems, and I had flowers sent to her place of work. She mentioned she had told me that a few of the ladies at work had been trying to get her to ask me out for several months, so I figured the flowers would both make her happy and be a firm thank you wink to the office girls lol. Thank you for everyone who commented or sent me messages on the first and second posts, they really made my day and helped me keep my cool to confess to her. Feel free to ask me anything, but I think this just about does it for my updates. Oop, they call her auntie. Her daughter calls me uncle. I doubt my ex will be a problem for some time. She lives in Vegas now and I live nowhere remotely near there. I found out through a little Facebook stalking that she's not with the creep she left me for anymore. I'll be honest, I really don't want to talk to her. She's been avoiding me for years and I really don't want to make her focus on me and come out of hiding. Besides, how do I even approach that? Hey. Girl who abandoned me. I don't know if you know, but we're divorced now. Yeah. And before you hear it from anyone else, I've been spending time with your younger sister. Yes, the one you've had jealousy issues with before. Oop, I'm a fan of therapy too. My son's therapist is so good with kids. My boy used to not be so talkative, but now after a session he'll come out to see me full of stuff he wants to say and telling me ideas his therapist gave him or exercises he should do. Every so often if he wants me to go in with him I will, but for the most part he enjoys going to the therapist now. If Jess comes back she and I are going to have some serious talks, especially if she wants to go anywhere near these children again. I'll fight tooth and nail to make sure she complies with Eve Update 3. I did talk to her back in September. I keep going to write an update for this, but life got pretty hectic. I did write like a 10-paragraph update like a month ago, but my laptop crashed, I lost it and got discouraged. The ex-wife is in a much better place and is in recovery. 8 months clean by this point. She finally told me the details of the affair and how things happened, how she got into drugs. Not stuff I really wanted to hear, but she's trying to get her life together, and as much as I dislike the things she's done to me and the kids I want her to get healthy. I shouldn't, but I worry about her still sometimes. Anyhow, I got around to telling her about Sylvia and she was dumbfounded by it. When I first met my ex she was 19 and Sylvia was 14, and in her mind she always viewed her as a kid in regards to me, which to be fair I did use to refer to Sylvia and her kid sister. But when she remembered that her sister is a fully grown adult who was married and had a child that her hinting I was a creep stopped. She did ask if I had feelings for her while I was married and I denied that. We talked about the kids and she was really regretful and crying throughout the conversation. She has no idea how she'd be able to face them again. I wanted to say something reassuring, but I don't want to give her the impression that I want her in their lives. Cordial, even friendly, but I'm not going to be stupid. She and Sylvia talked for a while too. I didn't eavesdrop intentionally, but from the bits I heard and what I was told, they talked about Sylvia's husband. As it turns out my ex had gotten arrested for ABNA that week and spent it in jail. She didn't even know he passed until a couple weeks after the funeral, and by that point she felt saying anything would make things worse. Things went as well as could be expected. Sylvia, the 3 kids, and I have been spending almost every day together, and I haven't been happier in years. My son and daughter love all the motherly attention they've been getting, and I'm really loving getting to learn more about my little niece. Life's good. Busy, but it's good. Thanks for asking. I might just copy and paste this as my update. Lol, alright, that was my comment update and nothing has really changed in the week since I wrote it. If anybody has any questions or comments I'd be happy to answer what I can when I can, but during this season my workload increases dramatically and I don't have as much time to be on here as I did when I first posted. I'm so glad I got up the nerve to try with her. I love her so much. I've been so long without a romantic partner, that I forgot what being in love, or feeling loved felt like. Now that I remember, it's shocking to me I didn't realize how alone and miserable I really was. I mean, for Christ's sake, we played Scrabble last night and for some reason it made me ridiculously happy, lol. Sylvia has been seeing a therapist since her husband passed for day-to-day life managing things and some grief counseling. Since we've been together I've gone with her a couple times at her request. I don't mention it too much in the overall post, but her husband was a very good friend of mine and of course she loved him dearly. More than my ex, her sister, there was some time where we felt somewhat guilty for getting together. We've got some work where that is concerned, but things are working out nicely. We've almost completely melded into one regular family unit. We're going to be shopping around for a place big enough for all of us. As it stands, Sylvia and her daughter are spending many nights at my place. Our daughters are thrilled at the idea of getting to be sisters now. We feel like how I always imagined a good family should feel like. Update 4. It has nearly been a year since my former sister-in-law, Sylvia, decided to begin dating. For anyone not familiar with the story, a quick TLDR. I have 2 children and had been married to her sister, my ex-wife. A combination of cheating, drug abuse, and child abuse ended that relationship. The ex ran off to another state with her lover. I remained on good terms with her family as they all took my side. Sylvia and her late husband became very close to me, but we tragically lost him to a workplace accident. Sylvia, in the years following that, became close as our daughters are best friends, and eventually she and I both developed romantic feelings for each other. A year later and we are living together and I couldn't be happier. We're currently living together and are in the market for a new home. Our children are really benefiting from having 2 parents around to care for them. Our daughters have begun to call each other sisters and my son is accepted in the same way. They're basically just normal siblings. It is interesting with my son. When he is talking to his friends or teacher he refers to Sylvia as his mom, but when calling her or talking to her he still calls her auntie, and our daughters are the same as I am uncle. It confuses some people we meet, but it's always an interesting story to tell. We haven't had much contact with my ex-wife since my last post, though from what we hear she's doing much better. Has a halfway decent job, a boyfriend, and is keeping clean. I don't like to think about her being reintroduced into my children's lives, but if she continues to be a clean and well-rounded person, it will make it much harder for me to deny her visitation should she seek it. Not just from a legal standpoint, but from a moral one as well. Neither Sylvia and I look forward to that day, but the worries seem way off. Her parents have stopped their prodding into our business and haven't tried to force the ex back into our lives as we feared. Our kids spend the weekend with them now, as my two are already doing that beforehand. So Sylvia and I get to spend Friday night and most of Saturday to go on dates and have some alone time. Our mutual friends were all pretty surprised by this and have been very supportive as well. They try to be polite and not mention my ex-wife, but every so often it does come up. Mostly everyone is just happy that we've found happiness together. One side of the family that I failed to mention in all of this was the family of her late husband. As you might expect, her daughter still sees them regularly, and they are very happy and accepting of the relationship. His father even told me point blank that he was glad it was me, because he thought he would hate his daughter-in-law bringing some strange man into his granddaughter's life. We haven't had many gatherings, of course, because of COVID, but the few get-togethers we have included them, and will always include them. Speaking of her late husband, Sylvia and I have talked quite a bit about our feelings, and she's even had me come along to one of her therapy sessions, because despite everything going so well, and the Enza and wonderful love we have for each other, his memory and presence will always be a part of our lives. She decided on her own that out of respect for me she had to take her wedding band off, something that caused a lot of sadness, as you can imagine. I told her that she didn't need to do this, and were we to get married, she's got two hands. After I said this, she began to wear it on a necklace instead. She wears an engagement ring now. I don't have any crazy story on how the engagement went down. I didn't spring it on her in some crazy public spectacle, but there were tears and hugs and kisses. If you've got any questions, I'd be happy to answer them. Thank everyone so much for all the positive words of encouragement. My son has had a good year. He's a very social kid, so I'm glad he's now got a mom and an extra sister, so he has more people to talk to. COVID took away a lot of the things he loved to do, and though I try to make up for it, playing catch with your dad isn't as fun as playing on a team with your friends. Aside from these understandable frustrations, he's acting a lot healthier and seems to much happier. Whatever Sylvia is doing, he wants to be a part of. Even when my ex-wife was still around, my son was always excited to see Sylvia. My daughter is very much a daddy's girl, so there have been a couple of times where she took offense to Sylvia and I holding hands and demanded to hold my hand, which turns into my niece wanting to hold my hand too, and they would bicker a little bit. That was only at the beginning, and things have normalized. Sylvia and I both try to give our respective daughters special time so it doesn't feel like a competition, but kids are kids. We don't have a date picked out yet. Sometime in 2022, I imagine. Most of the guilt I had was before we got together. He was one of my best friends. More than that, I saw him as kind of like an adopted brother. I was excited when they got married and when she got pregnant back, as I wanted he and I to be those cool dads everybody in the family likes. I got to show him little baby care tricks that would make his life a little easier. My ex wasn't around, so I felt it was more or less my duty to teach those two all I know about childcare. I had such a fun time doing that, and we became a lot closer before he passed. I've been protective of her since the night of the accident. And exploring a lot of my emotions over the last year. I guess I always felt that it was job for the family and his memory to keep her safe and cared for until she eventually found another man. I did feel guilty in the beginning, when I first began noticing I was attracted to her. I've always loved her to varying degrees, so any emotional feelings I had for her I never really felt bad about. Touching her though, or admitting to myself that I wanted to, that was another animal. It's of course not the most pleasant topic, but she and I have discussed it in private and in counseling, the degrees of guilt we've had after we began sleeping together. At first it was a more present, but now to see our little family together, you'd never imagine the hell both of us went through to pull it together. All I need from her is to love me, and not regret me, and all will be well.